So it's that time of the semester where you guys hound me about bonus. So, right, as I just looked up, and I'll post, the neuromuscular one got moved from Thursday to Friday at noon, same location, and I'll post this for you guys that are wanting to attend. So you know when it is and you can do your little write-up. I probably won't be at it. I have prior commitment on that Friday. And I was going to try to be there for the Thursday, but it's just not, this one is not looking like it's going to fit into my schedule. So I'm definitely interested to see what you guys write after you go, for sure. So the other thing is you'll notice that I already posted Module 4 objectives. And what I'm going to post later today, too, is some assignment links. And for bonus points, if you write out the objectives before I lecture, which basically is going to be 2 days, you'll have to submit these. So digestive will have to be submitted the day after our exam next week, so next Thursday. So, you know, maybe something to work on right after the exam. And then the other 2 will be due the following Tuesday. Because the Thursday after that is our last test. And you'll be glad, I'm not going to say anything further at this point, but you'll be glad if you write these out. And I'll also put it so that you can take a picture, right? So you don't have to type it out. You can literally write it out. You can take a picture and upload it like I've done for some other of the assignments. Okay? Any questions on that? Okay. So I highly suggest doing so. Because, one, we're going to go through that material really quickly, too. So the more prepared you are, the better you will be for taking that in. Then that brings us to today's lecture, which what did we do? We started skin. Yeah, we started skin. So I fully anticipate obviously not getting through skin and respiratory today. So you guys are still responsible for respiratory even if we don't cover it. And I will post a lecture from a previous semester for you guys. Okay, because we're out of time. It is what it is, right? I meant to warn you guys the other day and have you bring any questions you had to class. So we got through, we were on chickenpox, right? So let's just go through the questions, I think, for chickenpox. Let me get to my second posting of chickenpox. So there we go. So the scientific name for chickenpox, right, is varicella, right? And for some reason I didn't fill in the answers on this one. Why not? I don't know. That sucks. Okay, but we can do that. The causative agent is basically its name again. So it's a virus. That's the important part. So varicella refers to when you have chickenpox, but the virus whole name would be varicella zoster virus. And as I said before, it's in the herpes family. So this one is a double-stranded DNA genome. It incorporates into our cell's genome, right? And remember what cells did we say they incorporate into? Yeah, the sensory ganglia. So that's why it's so painful when it reactivates for individuals, and why it tends to like go along a particular area, right? Like you see here, right? Because it's erupting from the ganglia in this region and going down the nerve tract. Let's see. So how is it transmitted? If you have chickenpox, let me put it that way. If you have chickenpox, how is it transmitted? You know, direct contact with broken pustules, but respiratorily as well, right? Which is why it's so contagious. It is respiratorily transmitted when you have chickenpox. When you have a reactivation of the chickenpox that we refer to as shingles, it is not transmitted respiratorily, only contact with the wound itself, direct contact with the pustules of the wound. So that's important. And of course, the reactivation is referred to as shingles, And what year was the vaccine? 1995, right? So most young kids nowadays, thankfully, don't go through having chickenpox. They're not being brought to chickenpox parties to get chickenpox before they go to school, right? Vaccination has helped with that. And then they also have the shingles vaccine, which is, again, just a booster. It's a different concentration of the chickenpox vaccine to reignite the immune system and keep that virus under control from re-erupting. The next is warts. And so they're caused by numerous papillomaviruses that can infect the skin through a minor abrasion, right? So something very small that you wouldn't even notice. And it actually causes your cells to become tumor cells, although they tend not to be cancerous, but in some cases, especially with the cervix, they have been directly led and linked to cervical cancer, right? The wart itself is your cells that are deformed, right, by the virus infection. Warts, for the most part, they can take care of themselves, but there's different treatments, over-the-counter stuff that you can buy, at the local drugstore. Sometimes they refer to them as worry warts, right? Because the more you worry over them, it seems like the more you deal with them. But you're probably coming in contact, if you're getting them over and over, you're coming in contact with a source, right, that's harboring these viruses. For most individuals, when I was a kid, I played in the dirt. I had warts all over my hands. For some reason, I guess one particular place I was playing, I kept getting exposed, and in little scrapes and cuts in my hands, I was getting it. And my mom was putting whatever tincture medicine on it when I was a kid, and then she went into the hospital to have my sister. And I think, I stopped playing wherever it was that I was playing, and she stopped worrying over them, and they went away. And apparently, wherever that was that I used to play, I stopped playing because I stopped getting them too. So, another source of infection for people tends to be gyms, fitness centers, right? If people don't wipe down equipment and such, in showers as well. I've had this happen to me twice. Once when I was in high school, and once when I was adult here at Delgado. I got, even though I wore shower shoes, I still got a wart on the bottom of my foot, and that's referred to as a planter's wart. And the problem with those, though, is you're walking on it, so instead of it, bubbling up, it goes in to the tissue, right? It could be a serious problem if you don't detect it early enough. So when I was in high school, I had no idea, what the heck was wrong with the bottom of my foot. So it got pretty severe, and I had to have it surgically removed by a doctor, which really sucked. When I was an adult, I recognized it again. I was like, oh, crap, I got a planter's wart. Just went to Walgreens and put the medication on my foot, for several weeks to get rid of the wart before having it go further in.
Is it true that once you had a wart, you're more likely to get another one?
No. No, well, you are more likely if you keep going back to that source, right? It's really just source dependent, and having small abrasions that and exposure that the viruses can get in. So the likelihood has to do with exposure. So we also have a vaccine for some of the papillomaviruses that are involved in cervical cancer, because the problem with that, most ladies know, I don't know about you, I don't look at my cervix daily. I just don't, just kind of hard to see, right? So that's something that we have to do on a yearly basis, right, is get that checked out to make sure nothing abnormal is happening there. And these viruses have been directly linked to having those types of issues. They're easily transmitted, and again, sometimes you don't even know that you have are harboring these viruses. So you need to get that checked out. So the next would be talking about the importance of vaccine to help control and eradicate diseases from the world. So smallpox, for the most part, unless like some really isolated places of the world. From most of the world that we're aware of, we've been able to eliminate smallpox. And the reason for that is we had an effective vaccine and effective treatment, and we had a worldwide campaign to eliminate it. We have, as we just said, vaccine against chickenpox, and we can booster for helping with the reactivation known as shingles. Measles, we have an effective vaccine, and German measles as well. So why is it that we see outbreaks of these infections? Lack of vaccination, right? And I'm not even going to entertain the insanity as it relates to autism and vaccination. The answer is no. Scientifically proven, no. Right? Autism is a genetic defect. Okay? Don't not vaccinate your kids because you think they're going to end up being autistic. Okay? Do your research from accurate scientific places, right? And there is a very famous celebrity that has had to basically eat her words because she was wrong. Okay? But nobody pays attention to that part, right? They just pay attention to the part that she screamed wolf at one point, but she was wrong. So, is it 100% safe though? 100% safe? No. There is inherent risk involved. But with some of these infections, especially measles and German measles, there is the potential of death without protection. So we're going to get to a point, I believe, pretty soon in the near future, as far as public schools are concerned, you will not be allowed to sign a waiver for religious or any other reasons to not have your child vaccinated. If you want them to go to public school, you're going to have to vaccinate, unless that child has a medically documented reason not to receive the vaccine. Because too many people are choosing not to, right, we don't have enough protection. So, people not vaccinating is a serious problem, right? Because if you're not vaccinated, then you're susceptible and you are a source of infection for others, right? If you get it, you're passing it to others. If you're vaccinated, chances are you're not going to get it, so therefore you're not going to pass it on. If most of the people are protected, those few people who have medical issues that can't get vaccinated, they're protected by a phenomenon known as herd immunity, right? Where most of us are protected, we can't get the infection, so therefore we can't spread it to the ones that can't receive the protection. So the other problem is that I said world, right? So why is that a problem? The fact that we live in a world and not just a country. So we have our own issue here of people not getting vaccinated, right? Do you think that issue exists in other parts of the world? Yeah, potentially. And does everyone have the same access to health care and vaccination across the entire world? No. No. And when you can go from one side of the world to the other in one day with the travel means that we have today, right? You can fly from one side to the other. And that's the fear with some of the infections that pop up, right? Like SARS, right? We were really scared about that because someone could get on an airplane, travel across the world, and go expose other people to this infection. And the infection could spread to a level that we refer to as it being a pandemic, right? Which means worldwide. So advances in travel, differences in access to health care, right? Education about vaccination even, and what it does and how it works. And the problem with sometimes people not getting vaccinated. This is where sometimes the information age hurts us, right? When misinformation gets out there. So, how many reported cases occurred last year of measles? So, how do we find that out? There's a really awesome website put out by the CDC, the Centers of Disease Control. And you'll see I have it actually even bookmarked. And when you go down to about, they change this around on me all the time. It's always good to go back instead of just going to the direct link. So under science right here, the morbidity and mortality weekly report, so towards the bottom of the page. It used to be right in the middle. They changed up their homepage again. Right here is a report they put out on a weekly basis. And there's always, really interesting stuff. So definitely, information about the Zika virus outbreak. I find this one hysterical. Right? Sleep duration and injury-related risk behaviors among high school students. Right? All kinds of interesting stuff. But all reportable diseases are reported by each state and all the state health agencies to the CDC every week. And these numbers are published in a report every week at this site. So to get to that information, you go to state health statistics. And they keep track of mortality, which of course is death, right? But they don't keep track of like how people die. They don't tell you that. They just tell you how many people died. I'm like, I don't know that that's really, I don't know. People die. We're going to die. We're all going to die eventually, right? But I guess it's good to see if rates are increasing more so than others. But morbidity relates to notifiable diseases. So when you click on that, you can click on the year and the month and the week, right? And it'll automatically go to the current one. So we're week 14 right now in 2016. So I'll just go ahead and hit submit. And the first table is notifiable diseases that incidences are usually a lot less than 1,000, usually, right? So things like anthrax, right? We haven't had a case since 2011 because we've done a really good job of cleaning up as it relates to that infection. You'll notice with the arboviruses, we got quite the list going now. All right, all the different viruses transmitted by mosquitoes. Where's another one? So Hansen's disease, which is leprosy that we'll talk about later, right? You'll see that we still have quite a few cases reported each year. So it usually averages around 100. We're actually going down, it looks like. Because it looks like we're in the 80s now, right? Yeah, in the 80s. That's cool. 20 less people a year. I'll take that, right? That's another one. Plague. We haven't had a case of the plague, right? People think that's not still around. It is, right? But we know enough about it that we usually avoid it. So 2013, there was one reported case. Rabies, right? Really low, right? Because again, we know how to avoid these types of things. Yellow fever isn't an issue in the United States, and we're going to talk about it though, because that's one of those things that you have to worry about when you travel. But there is the potential that it could be here in the United States, and malaria was here at one time in the United States. But most of the time when we have reported cases, it's people who have traveled. And I'm wondering why malaria is not on the list. Okay, so obviously measles, right? Definitely a lot more. So I just hit my back button and I go to the next table. So the rest of these tables, because they have such higher incidences, they actually do them by state and regions. So table 2 is organized a little bit differently. Instead of a yearly chart, it is it's broken into the different states and regions. And then you have your total at the top of the page. So these are some newer ones that we've started reporting on where we didn't report on them in the past. So my big ones aren't in table 1 anymore. They're in table 2, part 2. So good old chlamydia, right? Sexually transmitted disease that wins the prize of probably the most reported cases. So as of this year so far, this current week, this year, this is just the current week in the United States, 16,000 cases. They don't have the totals on this chart anymore though. Because this is the cumulative. This is where we were this time last year and where we are this time this year. So this year we're actually doing a little bit better than last year. But if we go back to last year, the end of the year, Table 2, Part 2. Anyone want to guess how many? Almost 1.5 million cases in the United States last year of chlamydia. Serious problem. And so then, of course, we're sitting here in Louisiana and we want to know about our own state, right? So we're in West South Central. So about 28,000 cases last year. And then some people might, look and be like, let's see, where's Texas? So are we going to go to Texas? Right? So 140,000 so far this year. They're like doing worse than last year. Why are their numbers so much higher than ours? More people, right? That's one of the things you have to take into consideration with this type of data, right? It's not adjusted for the number of people, right? When you look at incidence rates, incidence means that it's been adjusted for population size, right? Okay, so let's find measles. So I'm thinking, I don't know, Part 7 might be the M's. Let's see. No, L. We're getting there. It's in alphabetical order. Oh, I'm still on last year, though. I got to go back. All right, so this is Part 8. It's not it. I got to go back, though. I got to go back to now, 14. Submit. So 8 wasn't it, right? So maybe 9. All right, here's mumps, which is one of the things that we're going to look at. So mumps, so far this year we've had 491 cases. That's up from this time last year where we only had 104. So that's not good news, right? Did I not see it? Oh, sometimes from year to year the tables change too, the order. So where's measles? I don't know. All right, I don't want to spend too much time flipping through the tables. Just wanted to introduce you guys to where you get this information, right, and how you access it. So I'll look it up. I'll look it up later. One of the years, 2010, and I have the summary right here. I'll make it bigger. From the summary report, measles was declared eliminated from the United States in 2000. Since then, though, the elimination has maintained through high population immunity among early detection of cases and rapid public health intervention, including contact tracing, isolation, and vaccination. Nonetheless, because measles remains endemic in most of the world, imports continue to result in sporadic cases and outbreaks in the United States, which can be costly to control. In recent years, the majority, 87% of the measles cases in 2010, were import associated. In other words, someone came from another country and brought it here and exposed individuals here to it. It was classified as internationally imported cases in 39 cases, 24 of which were in U.S. residents exposed while traveling abroad. So these are individuals who were not vaccinated, went abroad, got infected, and brought it back and infected others. Right? 15 of which were among international visitors. Right? And then they go on to list, right, all the different places where it came from. 33 states reported no measles cases, though, in 2010. In 2009, and I know last year we had the outbreak that happened in Disneyland in California, right? And again, people coming to visit, exposing people who are not vaccinated. And then we have these outbreaks that happen. So you can see, right, we've had some pretty scary upticks, right? 2014, we had a huge outbreak that happened. Right? In 2010, right, they were like, oh, well, look at what happened. Right? We've had several problems with this. Rubella, not so much, right? This one isn't as common or as endemic. But the reason why I talk about German measles, which is known as rubella, with this, because how do we protect ourselves against measles? What vaccine do we get? Yeah, it's given it's an acronym, right? It stands for measles, mumps, and rubella. And that's why in a moment too, even though mumps is not a skin infection rash, we talk about its epidemiology, right? These instances when we see it, because it's linked for us in the United States because the vaccine links these diseases together, right? So usually sometimes when you see an increase in one, you'll see an increase in the other if it's lack of vaccination, right? But there are other factors, like I said, German measles isn't as common as measles itself. So, again, not a skin disease, right? Even though we're talking about skin right now, we're going to talk about it because it's linked by vaccination. So how many cases, right? We could go look that up on the CDC's website. And you'll see that the highlights for a particular year, I think it's still the other one that I have. There it is. Yeah, still my 2010 report. There was, and here, let's look at the numbers first. Right? So look at, in 2014, y'all, 1,151 cases. But look back here, right? We had a serious outbreak in 2009 and 2010 of mumps. And what the CDC discovered, as you'll see in their summary report, the cases occurred from January 2010 to June. The outbreak primarily was adolescent boys in the Orthodox Jewish communities. Fewer than 3% of the cases associated with the outbreak occurred among persons outside this particular community. The majority, 65% of these cases occurred among males and 19% among adolescents aged 13 to 19 years old. Among the patients from whom vaccination status was reported, 90% had received at least one dose of the measles-containing vaccine. The MMR is what they're referring to as, right? And 74% had received 2 doses. So what does that say to you? We've got in this case, we've got vaccinated people getting infected. What red flag goes off for you with that? Okay. They had it in their system? A resistant strain? Or mutated? Right. So there is the potential that the vaccine is not effective, right? So if we've vaccinated that many people and we're still getting infection, maybe the virus has changed, right? And therefore, it's not a very effective vaccine. And I don't remember which one. I did look up for this one, and that's the other thing I wanted to show you guys, is that whenever you get vaccinated, they should give you this, but a lot of times I don't take it because I've read it like 8,000 times, especially when it comes to the flu vaccine. If you go to the CDC's website, so let's go to their main site again, you can get to those vaccination information sheets and all the general information about vaccination, when you should be vaccinated, who should be vaccinated. all that information. I'm looking for it to jump out at me. But whenever you want something right away, right, you just type it in the search field. See? The last things I probably searched were about mumps vaccine. So let's see. Yeah. We'll just go to the main page. So you can see the vaccination. Where's their form? Outbreaks, right? Information about it. Oh, this is the form. Oh. Look. Does not cause autism. Examine the evidence. Right? So there you go. I want this just the general, this is health person recommendations. Questions and answers. This might be their general fact sheet. But I want to say, from what I remember reading on this one, this is the sheet I was looking for. This one's they only believe that this vaccine is 60% effective, I want to say. Right, so you guys can find it for sure. You know how to get to it. Now, I probably have it in my office too. I have a whole stack of them. So what they did was they changed the recommendations that people should be boosted more often with that. So then the likelihood of it being effective increases, right? The more you get the vaccine, even though it's a lowly effective vaccine, the more likelihood you might actually develop immunity from the vaccination. Make sense? Okay. All right. So moving on. So that's it for viruses. So we get to skin fungi, and as we said in the opening of this chapter, right, there are numerous yeasts that are associated with our skin, and for women, the vagina. But there are other fungi that can infect the nails, the hair, and the outermost layer of our skin. They're referred to as dermatophytes, as in general, these types of infectious fungi. They draw them as cute little cartoons in commercials on TV, right? They do not look like that. What are they eating? What's in our skin, our hair, and nails in really high concentrations? What protein? Keratin. Keratin. It's the keratin, and that's why they infect those areas. And why those areas and when those areas become most vulnerable is when the skin is moist, right? Because all microorganisms need moisture, right? So when you have moisture associated with the hair, with the skin, with the nails, that's when you're more likely to develop these superficial mycoses, these infections with fungi of the skin. So we give it lots of different names, right? And there are several different fungi, even roundworm, right? They thought it was a worm. Tenai refers to worm. They thought they were worms, but in fact they're a fungus. My sister grows her hair out. She's really thin, long, beautiful blonde hair that she'll grow out every year, and she cuts for locks of love to make wigs for people with cancer. And she did that even before herself got cancer. So she, though, a lot of times, she works as a physical therapist, so having this long flowing hair, right, whacking into her patients wouldn't work out so good. So she, she'll wash her hair in the morning, and then she would put it up in beautiful braids and buns and all those fancy things you can do with long hair. The problem with that is when your hair is wet, right, and you stack all that wet hair up on the top of your head, right, and I mean she'd have hair down to her waist. Granted, it's thin, so I can't do that, right? I'd have a headache. This is about as long as it goes for me. Too much hair. I have that problem. She got a fungal infection of her scalp. What contributed to that? All that moist hair. I mean, when she would take her hair down at night, right, it would still be wet because the air couldn't get to it because there was so much hair bunched up in buns and braids and everything like that on top of her head, right? That it held in the moisture, and that left it susceptible to the fungal infection, right? So she had to stop doing that, right? And a lot of women, like one of my classes last semester, right, had a girl with long hair. She starts taking her hair down right, during my lecture. But yeah, it's not good to do that every day, day after day. Keep it bundled up and wet on the top of your head. You're going to leave yourself susceptible to a fungal infection. This is also why runners and stuff, right, they actually have special shoes for long distance runners that have ports in them so that the sweat can leak out of the shoes as they're running. Yeah, I know. Frightening, huh? I have a friend who has shoes like that. But it's important, right, because you don't want that moisture to stay trapped in that shoe for a long period of time. Like my son will get athlete's foot. We had to buy him special shoes because his little feet sweat like crazy. I can't put him in leather shoes. It holds in the moisture too much. He runs around like a maniac at recess, and then he has wet feet for the rest of the day because he sweats. Right? Make sense? Right? Babies. What's the problem we have with babies? Moist, wet diaper. Right? And that leaves it more susceptible to those types of infections. So unfortunately, right, things like that happen. And it's all due to the moisture problem. So a lot of times the treatment is just dry things out, right? All those ointments you put on the baby's bottom is to dry out the area, right, to try and keep it dry. Right, these infections can be quite uncomfortable, right, because they're itchy, because the immune system response and the rash that ensues, there tends to be a bad odor associated with them as well. So several different genera of fungi are common offenders for these types of infections. The skin tend to be much easier to treat topically. It's when the nails or the hair follicles get infected that usually you have to take oral medications. So remember, we're dealing with a fungus, right? We're not talking about bacteria. So we can't take penicillin, say, for these types of infections. Instead, a lot of the antifungals, like this one, for example, this class of drugs, remember, we've got to target something different about them that we don't have to be most effective. And for them, they have a cholesterol-like substance known as ergostol in their cellular membranes. We do not have this. We have cholesterol in our membranes. So drugs that interfere with the synthesis of this weaken the fungal membranes and cause them to burst as they're growing. Right, so it's all about targeting the differences and being selective in our toxicity, right? We don't want to take something that's going to damage our cells. We want to take something that will just damage their cells. Well, they're eukaryotes, so they're really all not that different from us, but this is one of those key differences that we can key in on because they're different from us in the fact that they have ergostol and we do not. So that's it for skin.